welcome back. My name's Kay Chohan. I'm here with my fellow podcaster, Mike Elwood. Mike, say hello.
Hello, everyone.
That's Mike, and I'm Kay. Inner Circle Boardrooms, this is a place that you want to be if you're interested in business, finance, and leadership, particularly if you're a busy professional on the go. So the conversation for today is, what place do universities have in the modern workplace? So let's just reassess COVID class of 2020. Pre-COVID, we had the highest employment rate. Currently, though, post-COVID, 1 in 6 people globally under the age of 25 are unemployed. Of that, 40% of those worked in leisure, hospitality type of roles. So what we're going to see moving forward is roughly about 700,000 people will be coming out of the universities. There's going to be a huge shift. And particularly when you look at international students, the impact of that and their survival over the next few months. We've also seen a decline in the number of jobs posted since March, and Europe anticipates 7.4% decline in terms of activity. So that presents some challenges for universities and governments globally. And a conversation me and Mike are going to be having is around, is it worth going to universities in this day and age? And what do universities need to do to stay current? So with that said, Mike, let's start a conversation. I know you've got 2 young boys who've recently left university.
No, so they've both got roles now unaffected by COVID. So we're fortunate that they're both in jobs and started on their careers. But I've reflected on both and thought, what did university play in their part, and actually the cost of it now, which they take into their working lives, and it comes back as effectively a tax, I guess. People talk about student debt. In reality, it's a tax. I think if you haven't paid it back, then the principal will be wiped out. But it's a tax for those higher earners. So coming out of university means you come out with a financial burden around you into a tough world. If you contrast that with apprenticeships in what I would describe as more professional circumstances, so KPMG, for instance, as an accounting firm taking on apprentices, actually theirs is quite a good route to develop real professional qualifications, get real experience, be paid, and get yourself moving in life without all the burden of going to a university. So I look at it now and think they're quite outdated institutions, most of them. Very well respected, lots of research happens, but in a world that's been disrupted, they can't avoid that. And the pandemic again throws into light, is that how we want people to learn? Are they the best places to learn? There's an awful lot can be done online and digitally. Do you have to do it over 3 or 4 years? Does it need to cost so much? How flexible can they be? All these questions can be thrown and challenged. And then above all, actually, what has happened to industry? What has happened to the outside world? And what do they need when recruiting for their own workforce? And the question we've got to ask is, are universities still providing that or not?
Students who, they go to university, they do a generic degree, and then they leave university and they don't use that degree.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, they're being taxed for going out wanting to continue studying because they didn't want to go out and work, which is perfectly fine if that's the route that you want to take. However, I do think universities do have a place if you know the direction you want to take your career. And an example of that is if you know you want to become a doctor, then I genuinely think you need to go to university, because that will give you the insight from a theory base. However, it doesn't necessarily give you the practical experience, but you do need those qualifications like maths or English or medicine or whatever it be. Do I think university is worth it? Yes, if you know what you want to do. If you don't, then you're better off, like Mike said, doing an NVQ and going down the employment route, because you're going to get hands-on experience.
But I also think, so take lawyers, for instance, and actually the way that law is done. If you if you add into the mix there kind of artificial intelligence and machine learning around how agreements are put together, that industry is going to change quite a bit. And actually, the traditional law degree, is that going to be as relevant as it was? I don't know.
Law's not going to change. The laws, fundamentally, there's always going to be a form of law and order in place.
Yeah, but the law won't change, but the people who apply it might change.
Agreed.
And actually doing a law degree in a big red brick building somewhere may not be the most efficient way of doing it.
Yeah, as long as you know the reason why you're there, have a very clear objective. If you want to be in control of your future and where you end up, then really map out where you want to go 10 years. If you don't know where you want to be right now, you need to figure out what careers, what does it involve me to do to get into that career? Who can I speak to about that role? Understand it a little bit more, and then work from that way.
Always worry about starting with a number rather than what it is, the sorts of things you like doing. And I don't mean types of jobs.
But I mean, what they like doing. I always say to people, where do you want to be? And they're like, oh, I don't know. What do you like doing? Oh, I like this. I like a bit of that. And you throw a few jobs to them and they're like, oh, no, I don't want to do that. And they'll find a reason as not to why they don't want to do it. So I always say I like the numbers because the numbers tell you a story.
That's just a number, though, isn't it? Just a number. No, I mean,
start somewhere. If you don't know where you want to go, Mike, you have to start somewhere. And the reason why I start with the number is most people will say, I want a style of living where I've got a 5-bedroom house, I'm driving the latest car, I've got 4 or 5 holidays. That's the reason why I start with the number, because
I think that's changing, though. I think people are looking at life slightly differently. And I think they want more balance these days. I think younger people want more balance, and therefore they want jobs. Well, jobs are changing so often as well. So actually, younger people are likely to have 4, 5, 6 different careers within their overall career. So to say what do you want to do is quite hard, I think. For me, I think it's about building the skill base up that's adaptable to different jobs, and that might be about doing analysis, looking at a kind of analysis. It might be about doing some kind of relationship role, whether that's sales or whatever it might be. It might be about managing a group of people, but try and build a skill base up of that you can take to different jobs as the jobs evolve. But it's tough. It's tough for them. I also think that universities and industry still have more to do about what one wants from the other.
Yes.
Universities are notoriously difficult to get to change. It's sort of, this is the way we do it. And, evident recently in the A-level fiasco about, there was from the initial stance was, we're not changing our standards. So you got all these people over here really troubled, and it was, well, we're not changing. And that seems to be an attitude that pervades across the universities. And in some ways, they need to meet people a little, or they need to meet industry a little, and find out what are the people and what do industry need, so they can evolve their offering. I know some of them have, but they still appear pretty inflexible to me. And I think there's a lot to happen in that space.
Yeah. And so what do you think employers look for when students are coming out of university?
It's kind of recognising that this is competitive and that the qualifications are taken for granted. So you have to do something to stand out. If you want to be certain of getting on a graduate programme, getting a job, you have to do something to stand out. And when you get through it all, there are only 2 things that are really important in employment. It's kind of around attitude and intellect. Universities deal with the intellect, and the bit you need to show people you've got is the right attitude. And some of that is, what have you done in the past? So what can I look to in your past that tells me how you're going to behave in your job in the future?
To your point, I think an increase of supply, there's a shortage of skills, which means I think universities understand the transformation of digital. They just see it as a tool to be able to communicate, and they don't understand the disruption it's having within the corporations in how consumers use it and transact with it from a user experience as well.
Well, just look at the number of data analyst jobs that are around now. And I don't know what you can do in terms of university of doing data analytics, but that's huge. And that's driven from the amount of data that we're able to get out of organizations these days. And how do they interpret that? How do they use that to improve themselves? There's lots happening in that space. And I don't know where university are in playing their part in that.
Totally agree with you. I think an employer is looking for somebody who's got commercial awareness of what's going on around. So understanding things like impact, reading things like the Financial Times, for instance. They're trying to understand what is going on with these businesses. The other thing is communication skills, how you communicate with other people. If you're an introvert, you need to figure out a way to get extrovert. And it may be you go out and you start talking to people you normally wouldn't speak to. Maybe you go to a party and you just go up to people and you start talking to them. That's a way to overcome being an introvert.
But that's an interesting point. Why do you need to overcome being an introvert? Why don't we value introverts as much as we do extroverts?
Really good question. I'm not saying we don't value them. I'm just saying because in an organization, the far greatest challenge for most businesses that I see today is people work in silos. And so if you don't know how to communicate, you being an introvert, that's going to mean that when an issue comes up, you're not going to communicate effectively to talk to the business and tell them, because you're going to be like, oh, I better not say that. That's what I mean by introvert. I don't mean introvert by going out, being loud.
But I think it's an important point, because I think all selection processes... all selection processes these days are designed for extroverts. And everybody says, make yourself stand out, be different, get yourself noticed, all that sort of thing. And I always think, but we're also on about diversity. And I mean, real diversity, not just visual diversity, but real diversity. And are we missing something in selection processes that mean introverts are just disadvantaged? And I kind of feel they are disadvantaged in the way that we go through assessment centres. What I'm saying is, I think it's just recognising that the way that we select needs to think more broadly, because I've seen it and I know exactly how it is, and it's a real and there's sort of an arms escalation in doing charity trips to far-flung parts of the world to stand out in the selection process, whereas actually the guy who's worked in a retail environment somewhere close to home might have just as a relevant experience. He just doesn't shout about it in the same way.
What is your take on how to become ready for a fast-paced, changing environment?
Yeah, so being work ready in particular, I think is built
work ready as well. I mean, I know we've spoken about some points.
I think it's having different levels of experiences. Yeah. So the standard at one day would have been you go to university and work in a bar to get yourself some cash and work experience before you go into the real world. I think there's lots of opportunities these days to think about internships to prepare yourself. So use your summer holidays to get internships, get a range of different part-time jobs when you're younger. Think about building that broader base of skills and experiences. Do different things, be part of different groups and societies, be worldly wise as much as you can. And I think that's the bit about being work ready. So if you've got an idea of how the world is operating these days, as it changes, you're better placed to take advantage of that, and you're better placed to plan your way through the educational system, whether that's university or otherwise.
So if someone came to me and said, what can I do to become work ready? I would say, firstly, depending on where you are. So if you're relatively young, my advice would be to you is start thinking like a business leader right now. Think like an owner operator. And what I mean by that, young students and kids are very good at negotiating. They're the best, fantastic at negotiating, and they don't realize it. So my advice is this: rather than go out and get a part-time job, be the part-time job. And what do I mean by that? Is create your own business, and it doesn't have to be anything huge. You might have clothes that you don't wear at the moment that are designer clothes or half decent, and they don't fit you no longer. Why not sell it on the marketplace on Facebook or Snapchat or Instagram? Create your own business, you get to learn about setting up a business, you learn about pricing, you learn about, dealing with consumers, and this is all from your home. You don't have to go anywhere, and you'll be making money. Rather than sitting in a coffee shop and serve me a mocha, you could be sitting at home having a mocha and just selling items. And if you were then to go into an job role, and they're saying, well, actually, what transferable skills have you got? Well, let me tell you about a business I started. If that's not for you, and you fancy going into that coffee shop environment, that's also absolutely okay. But then my advice to you would be to get a mentor within that coffee shop environment that can coach and mentor you. Ideally, try getting your supervisor, because obviously you want someone who's punched above their weight to where you are right now. Obviously, you have to see your ideal self and start taking on additional responsibility. Maybe it's counting all the money at the end of the day. Maybe it's getting involved in how you price up the items and give customer deals. Get away from just doing transactional tasks. Start thinking, how does this business work? I went to Starbucks and I took my little niece, and she was so interested in her coffee. You know what I was doing? I was counting the amount of cars that was there, and I was figuring out, even if the average sale was each car £10, how much money was that? And if that was every hour, how much money? So that's what I mean about thinking.
Yeah.
Constantly thinking about the ecosystem.
I think that's a good point. I think if you're going to take the coffee shop job, you're right. Is think about what do you get out of it, and whether it's just about learning about customer service, what customer needs, about product, whatever it is, use it as a learning experience.
Yeah.
And whatever you do needs to be done that way.
Yeah. So with that said, guys, look, I hope that was useful for you guys, particularly if you're in that environment at the moment where you're just doom and gloom about what's going on. Firstly, you need a positive mindset. You need to be positive. There are so many opportunities out there. So do not think there are not opportunities. And if you think that you're not seeing the opportunities, it just means you're not thinking big enough. So, and if you need some help around that, some coaching or mentoring, myself and Mike would be happy to give up some of our time. And we've got other coaches and mentors that I'm sure would be happy to give up some of their time in a classroom style environment. If we get enough of you who show some interest, we would be happy to do something like that for you to help you on that journey. So with that said, thank you very much, Mike. Always great to have you here. We'll be back next week with another conversation, and we'll see you then. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.